Hello, everyone. Good evening, and welcome to the season finale of season four. Season 4, episode 9 of the Green Agenda on the topic Millennial and Gen Z EJ Agenda Youth Perspectives on Environmental Justice Policy. My name is Kayla Shannon, your host, alumna of Spelman College, and an advocate for the city of Flint. Before we get started, we want to take a moment to thank our partners and sponsors of the Green Agenda, the Environmental Defense Fund, and the Climate Action Campaign. As 2024 marks yet another historical election year, Gen Z and millennial voters represent over 40% of the bloc. Tonight's episode features young climate and environmental justice leaders who will discuss what they want to see from our local, state, and federal legislators. Before we get started, y'all always know we have heavy hitters lined up for you all, so I want to take a moment to pause and give them each an opportunity to introduce themselves, give us your name, your pronouns, and what you would like our audience to know about you, starting with Melody.
Hi everyone, my name is Melody Marsh. I am a second-year junior at the illustrious Howard University, studying health science with a minor in chemistry, all the way from the great city and state of Flint, Michigan. Yes, and I'm here with the Young, Gifted, and Green EJ Council, so I'm very excited to share a little bit about my experience with them.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anthony David Jr. I am a DC native. I'm 23 years old. I'm here today representing Empower DC, where I am the environmental justice community organizer. Thank you all for having me today.
Thank you for coming.
My name is Keyshawn Pearson. I am the president of Memphis Community Against Pollution. I'm from Memphis, born and raised. My pronouns are he and him. I am here because we are in a fight for our planet, a fight for our communities, and a fight for our future. And so I'm glad to be dedicated to such a cause and share whatever it is that I know, but also to learn from these amazing people here next to me.
All right, and with that, we're going to go ahead and get right into it. So in a 2022 poll, 59% of young people said that they were very or extremely worried about climate change. And more than 45% said it negatively affected their daily lives. A 2019 Amnesty International survey of 10,000 young people found that climate change was the most common issue they cited facing the world. It's clear that the two youngest generations are very concerned about the future of our planet. Starting with Melody, what are the most pressing environmental justice issues that millennials and Gen Z activists like yourself are currently focused on, and how do these issues disproportionately impact marginalized communities?
I would say that the most pressing environmental justice issues that are impacting marginalized communities would be climate change and air pollution. Starting with climate change, with the extreme weather events, hurricanes, the extreme heat, flooding, all these different things, I feel like marginalized communities often don't have the infrastructure for these events, as well as they don't have the hazard mitigation plans and to be prepared for these things. And then on top of that, the belief that climate change is still not a real thing is truly plaguing our communities. So that's climate change, which is a huge problem, but also air pollution because of the different big polluting companies that come in our communities, the highways, the wastelands, all these different things that get placed right in the middle of marginalized communities, affecting their public health and affecting the environmental justice in their area. So I think those are the two things that millennials and Gen Zs are focused on, really educating our community on the importance of environmental justice, on the importance of climate change, the impacts and implications, as well as really protesting the disruptions to our community with the big polluting companies, wastelands, and all those different things.
You summed it up very well. Anything you all would like to add?
Yes, I definitely would like to echo air pollution as well. I think something to kind of, attach to air pollution is also public housing as well. A lot of our public housing, areas are in environmental justice communities. We have air pollution as it relates to outdoor pollution, but also indoor hazards as well. A lot of these public housing areas are not properly, cleaning out their vents and looking at ventilations. They're not expecting and addressing mold issues within public housing units. And on top of that, also the legacy pollutants that are plaguing these communities as well, with the hazardous waste that Melody was mentioning as well. And something I would also like to mention is, renewable energy as well. I'm not necessarily a big energy person, but, I definitely do think renewable energy is something that's at the forefront, of our generation as well, looking at solar for all and all these other new innovative programs that are coming down the pipeline.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Keyshawn?
I think I'm really just going to restate what they are saying. And I thought I was going to be novel with my answer, but air pollution is something that I don't think a lot of people are educated on or really notified about. I think when it comes to our water, people think, it's a hot day, I need water, right? Our kids need water, our plants need water, our animals need water. And so we do have a different view and a different lens as it pertains to air pollution. It's something that's invisible, right? And so it doesn't get a lot of attention. And so I think with this next generation and its focus and honing in on air pollution and the causes of it, because air pollution didn't just get bad yesterday. Mm-hmm. It's a legacy of pollution that's happened that's gotten us to this point. I'll just say for Southwest Memphis, where I live, that's over 80% of the particulate matter, which can get into your lungs and affect your breathing and just your quality of life, is all concentrated in a majority Black area, right? And so you can duplicate that around the United States of America, different communities, but usually with a Black or Latinx makeup demographically are struggling to breathe. And there's a reason for that. And what we know is that the next generation, it has to be addressed in order for us to have clean air to breathe. But it's not to mitigate or to say that, we don't need clean water, because it's both and. Mm-hmm. We need both and we deserve it. It's our human right to be able to walk outside and have clean air to breathe that's not also choking us and killing us.
Thank you. And I think underscoring all of what you all discussed, it's important to bring into the conversation also healthcare infrastructure,
That's right?
Because given all of the different challenges, all the environmental disparities that exist that disproportionately impact marginalized Black and brown poor communities, it's important to also recognize the disparities and disproportions that exist with the access to health care, right?
100%.
Being able to get the support that they need in order to address these issues, in order to address the fallout that happens in the body when you're consistently exposed to hazardous materials, when you're consistently exposed to unclean water and air pollution, not being able to go to the doctor, right, to just
right.
get basic checkups mm-hmm. is extremely devastating when you talk about the buildup and the continuous impact over the course of years, right? And not only that, but the impact through generations. Mm-hmm. It's incredibly important for us also to acknowledge the push in the Millennial and Gen Z generations for healthcare to be easily accessible for all.
Yeah, I think healthcare is a large part of what has to be bolstered in order for us to actively take care of the folks who will develop cancers and will mm-hmm. develop other ailments as we move forward. So that healthcare infrastructure has to be in place. The only other thing that I would add is I also believe in calling these people out, mm-hmm. right? So the Tennessee Valley Authority is proposing a gas plant in Memphis that we know is harmful for our environment and the air that we breathe. The XAI facility in Southwest Memphis, which is an Elon Musk company, right, is also contributing to the air pollution. And so these companies and these corporations also have to be named and held accountable for what they're doing in our cities and to our communities and our families. Sure. I lost both of my grandmothers, mm-hmm. both, to cancer. And I live in a place where cancer is 4 to 22 times in certain places higher than the average rate across the United States. And it's simply because we live in this specific zip code. Mm-hmm. And so just wanted to add that to the question.
Yes. And that's important to note because your zip code, your area code is one of the highest indicators
That's right.
of health across demographics, and so that's very important to note. And I just also want to note before we get off the topic of healthcare infrastructure, also along with the physical health caretakers that our communities need access to. It's also behavioral health, right?
That's right.
So also looking into mental health supports and behavioral health supports and cognitive health supports for within our communities.
That's right.
So moving forward, millennials immediately followed by Gen Zers have used social media to revolutionize the environmental justice movement. However, skeptics say that being a social media influencer is not enough to address issues on the ground. This time, starting with Keyshawn, can you share specific examples of how young people are advocating for bold, intersectional environmental justice policies on the ground, and specifically share successful strategies that they are using?
Wow, that is a extremely loaded question you got. But I think I'll handle it in two pieces. So first, I think we have to also do a little bit of education around the vocabulary. Influencers, to me, right, are people who are paid to advertise something, right? That's an influencer. I think when I look at the environmental justice folks like Little Miss Flint, Brown Girl Green, I look at Leah Thomas, Vic Barrett, these folks are motivated creators, right? And that's how I labeled them, and that's the framing that I would use, is they have something that they care about so much that they want to create using the facilities that they do have in order that more people know about what's going on and are able to really dive into that truth. And so with Little Miss Flint, it's about the Flint water crisis. And with MCAP, it's air pollution. It was previously a pipeline fight that we were in. And so when I think about the strategies that these creators are using, they are doing multiple things. One of the things that I think folks are doing a great job of is raising money. And so Little Miss Flint has hosted a couple of different fundraisers that have helped to raise money for the people of Flint, and that has been astronomically successful. There are other influencers / creators. I'm gonna say creator, but I'm used to influencer. These creators have also just galvanized support. One of the things that we did, my brother, who is now Representative Pearson, one of the things we did was have people to sign on to letters, send emails to city council. And so one of the strongest things you can do is mobilize people. And so we hosted live events, but we started out building that foundation and building that group of support online. And it's continued to grow, but the support in real life, or IRL, has continued to grow too. So those strategies have been helpful, and that's something that I've seen.
Thank you, Keyshawn. Other panelists?
Yeah, using the same language as you, these creators, I think it's a start. It's a start to educating the community and getting the word out about these environmental justice issues. Although I will say that they are doing the groundwork as well, but it's also encouraging others to do the groundwork as well. And then also I want to take the opportunity to talk about the Environmental Justice Council and all the amazing work that we get to do. We get to write different public comments to the EPA on multiple different environmental justice issues, really advocating and using our voice, as well as recently just participated in the Flint Weekend of Service, where we had the opportunity to have a barbecue and invite the community out and educate them on some of the environmental justice concerns, as well as provide different resources. And then also this summer, I had an opportunity to speak at our summer camp and facilitate a session talking about the importance of green parks and how that affects climate change and different things like that. So I think our council with Young, Gifted, and Green is amazing, and they're truly bold individuals that want to advocate for our communities and things like that.
Thank you. Anything you would like to add?
I think you all kind of hit on it on kind of both ends. I think for me, I haven't necessarily been, too much on like the social media scene, so I can't really speak to, what's successful or not successful. But I think anything helps. Like you said, education is super important, and as I feel like Gen Z knows the best on how to use social media and how to use the tools for social media. So I'm sure whoever is out there doing what they're doing, they know what they're doing. So,
and that's just that
you're
on
right.
that. Yeah, this topic really excites me. I mean, in part because this is what I wrote my senior thesis about, right?
Okay.
Was the impact that social media has on information systems today and the role that it serves in informing our electorate, right? And so data and statistics show that there is a growing trend towards social media as a fact-finding source amongst our generation. That began with the generation of millennials and continued into Gen Z, where we see more and more young people going to Instagram, going to Twitter, going to, I don't know about Facebook, maybe millennials, going to Facebook before they're going to the newspaper, right? Before they're going to read a media article or those types of sources, before they're going to watch the news, right? They're going to check on their phone.
That's right.
And so for that reason, it's incredibly important for us to discuss social media. It's something that cannot be ignored, right? Especially as we talk about what the politics of tomorrow and the politics of today even look like.
That's right.
Social media has a growing influence on what it means to be informed. And not only that, it's extremely important to acknowledge the impact of social media on disinformation as well, right? And so it's incredibly important for creators in this space to be present on social media because disinformation is also rampant in that space. And we saw the impact of disinformation in the process of Trump's 2020 campaign. We saw the impact of disinformation on the insurrection. We saw how deeply social media can impact the trajectory of our political climate. And so it's incredibly important to acknowledge not only the impact that it's having positively, but also to note how important it is for us to be present in those spaces as creators and as folks that do have influence in this space, right? And influence, to be clear, doesn't necessarily have to mean 100,000 followers, right? That even if you have influence within your close circle, that is important, right? That you are capable of calling people to action even in small spaces, and that alone is incredibly important. So moving along, the current administration has allocated the largest investment in history in climate and environmental justice, but many of these resources get lost in the sauce, so to speak. They don't typically reach Gen Z and millennial-led organizations, largely because of both generations' anti-government philosophies, and public funding is extremely difficult to manage, making it super unappealing to young people, right? So starting this time with Anthony, what innovative funding models or alternative pathways could federal agencies design to help ensure these critical resources reach the young grassroots activists during the environmental justice or driving the environmental justice movement?
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to have to break this answer down because
Break it down.
this is something that's like truly dearly to my heart and something that I feel like I have been traumatized by. You know, so for starters, you know, I feel like these governmental agencies definitely need to watchdog the people that they're giving their money to. You know, you can't just say, oh, I want to invest in young people and just throw it at the universities. You know, the universities are businesses at the end of the day. You know, there's only so much a student can do, you know, outside of their curriculums to, you know, hold their universities accountable when making sure that that money is actually flowing down to the students. You know, so not every university has a student government, you know, not every university has these mechanisms to make sure that the proper funding is getting to the students. You know, for example, you know, during my undergraduate career, I was at Harrisburg University of Science and Technology. You know, during that time, I sat on the Environmental Justice Board for the whole state of Pennsylvania, the youngest person on that board. And I've always been an organizer. You know, in high school, you know, been doing that. So you know, I had no problem going outside of anything to get what I need done. You know, I was organizing, you know, teaching the city's youth about the importance of urban agriculture, you know, holding different events, you know, taking them to field trips to farms, you know, creating hydro jars for them to take home, and not a penny came to me from my university. You know, not a dime. Everything that I done was out of my own pocket, and it was even hard for me to even get a classroom on my university to teach these kids about the importance of agriculture and the urban heat island effect in their city. You know, so things like that just rubs me the wrong way, and I could go on and on about this story. Anyways, but the main point here is really making sure that the government agencies really need to do a better job at, you know, listening to the community members and knowing what the communities need. You know, fortunately, on the nonprofit level, you know, the EPA has created this TIC-TAC, which I'm going to have to pull up the acronym for because, you know, the government loves their acronyms, so I got to break it down. So this is the Environmental Justice Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Centers Program. So basically what this funding mechanism does, it recognizes kind of not necessarily community champions, but kind of hubs within the region. So the Region 3 has their own hubs, you know, breaking it down by states, and all the other regions got their hubs too. You know, through my nonprofit work, you know, Empower DC is the hub representatives for the DC, for the whole city, you know, and we are working with, you know, other cities. So it's like a grant of a grant, a grantee of a grantee of a grantee kind of process, and making sure that the nonprofits are really driving, you know, how the money is flowing within the communities. So, you know, so to break this down further, you know, basically our jobs is to look at all the EJ kind of nonprofits or organizers within the communities and connect them with technical assistance. So if these community members need air monitoring, you know, we're connecting them to scientists related to that. If they need policy help, you know, if they need, you know, GIS help, you know, we are connecting them to kind of the more technical things, because at the end of the day, a lot of these residents don't have the time nor the patience to pick up these skills and be the experts to hold all these people accountable. You know, even my job as an organizer, you know, it feels like I'm wearing a whole bunch of different hats, you know, trying to digest all these things related to EJ, because unfortunately EJ is such an intersectional issue that has had so much years of neglect that, you know, I feel like everyone is learning as we are going, you know, as we are addressing this issue. So, you know, I feel as though, you know, it definitely takes a community, it definitely takes collaboration, but it also takes money and, and funding, you know, to go, you know, through the community. So, you know, making sure that, and again, government grants are hard, you know, no resident take the community change grant, for example. You know, that's like a 90-page document that people have to sift through and go through just to make sure that the money is getting to their communities. And fortunately enough, under the Biden administration, you know, he has invested a lot of money within this issue. So, you know, it is important for every person. If you know a grant writer in your community, making sure that these people are, you know, working with community members to get access to this money. So, and I think we need the consistency with the government as well. You know, it doesn't take enough for you all to just post about a grant opportunity. You know, you have to have community sessions. You need to be in the community and making sure that the community members are answering their questions in person or virtual. You know, we have these Zoom platforms now, but you know, you making sure that you are with the communities at every step of the process and making sure that the grantees are doing what they're supposed to be doing as it relates to the community.
Other thoughts?
Did you want to?
Yes, I agree with everything you want to say. And like, honestly, when it comes to the grants, like eligible language, like easy language for communities, so that when they're going to fill it out, okay, I know what I'm doing, I can understand this. And yes, having that support all the way throughout. We live in a social media world. We live in a world that technology is so easily at our fingertips. There's a way to connect with the community. There's a way to speak to these people and help them throughout these different programs and give them the resources that they need.
Also, I think changing the grant requirements as well, because a lot of the times these grants, you need to be a 511(3)C, A, B, D, like, but also, and then need all these years of experiences. But if I'm a young person who just wants to, you know, make change and do change, I have to, you know, partner with another nonprofit and just kind of like work under whatever they got going on. But if I want to be my own innovator and my own leader, it's a lot harder for a young person to do that, because, you know, the universities like to cherry pick how they like to spend their money. You know, the nonprofits already got their own like agendas going on, which ain't nothing wrong with that. But when it comes to, you know, just a regular young person, unless they're like within their little EPA circle, it's going to be kind of hard for you to access to these funds. Like I couldn't even name you a grant right now that a young person could probably apply to get these access, So I think they need to kind of lower their requirements or change the process or something to make these funds more accessible for younger people to do what they need to do to help their communities.
Yeah, I also think that's the importance of it. It has to be created. Like I bring up like Justice 40. That was like a huge thing, and it was specifically for marginalized communities. So we need policymakers to start being innovative, because there is a problem. You see the problem, and it can be fixed. We just have to create the policy. We have to innovate in the areas. So it's not looking at old policy. It's not trying to change the different things, because those things they led us astray. They're wrong. Like they put us in this situation. So it's the importance of being innovative in it and creating these different grants, that opportunities that young people can access and can be that are easily accessible. Yeah.
Keyshawn, anything to add?
Listen, y'all, I just want to clap for y'all, because I mean, y'all have articulated, honestly, even more than I've ever understood about this particular subject, and especially like at your age. I'm a millennial, like on the like edge of like, I'm like in my 30s. So it's just like honestly inspiring for me to just learn from y'all about like your experience, because I think it would have been extremely frustrating for me to realize like, oh, I can't do my own thing. Like I can't do what I've envisioned. I had to do it under this umbrella, or I had to overcome these hurdles. And I think coming in at my age, when I did just in 2020, pivoting because of a pipeline fight, right? It wasn't that I was in my high school years pursuing this. And so your tenacity, resilience, and your self-education, kudos. I just got to say that. And as it pertains to the specific question, I think it's two parts. I think it is the innovation that's necessary to satisfy what your goals are. Even those being individual goals, I think we have to be very thoughtful about creating space and funding for how unique it is, the perspectives that you have. But as it pertains to the actual funding models, I don't think they got to be innovative. In 2020, they got billions of dollars to millions of people.
In days.
Right? And so I don't even necessarily think it's innovative about the funding systems. They have to become more efficient. And I don't think there's been a lot of intentionality around making them a lot more efficient as it pertains to environmental justice work.
Exactly.
And so that intention, I think, has to come and has to be present in order for that type of work to persist and for us to get the job done. There's no way substantial and long-lasting work and change is going to happen if we don't have the funding for it to happen. The reason why these billionaires can do so much damage is because they have the funding to do it, right? And so you need an equal opposite reaction as it pertains to how we're addressing environmental justice. And so that's all I have to add, but thank y'all.
I think this is another topic that like I could go on about all day, because funding infrastructure is and has been such a major issue for so long. And again, it's a recurring topic that comes up for us on this platform, is talking about the need for better systems of accountability within our funding structures. Because Melody, you mentioned the importance of policy, which I concur. It's incredibly important for policy to be written into place, but beyond policy is the process, right? So like what happens after it's signed into effect, right? Have you actually thought through and created the infrastructure for the logistics of what that policy looks like in action to actually come to pass?
That's right.
Because more oftentimes than not, the policy is created and it sounds good and it looks good and it's shiny and new, and I'm just a bill. Yeah, I'm only a bill sitting here on Capitol Hill, and it goes through the whole process and we make it to the end, and then it falls flat. It falls flat when we actually see, when we watch and wait for the dollars to funnel down into local municipalities, when we're waiting for them to get to the grassroots organization, there's pennies on the dollar left by the time it gets to the grassroots level. And so I think that's one, is that it's so important for us, as you all have already mentioned, to change the systems of accountability that are in place, and in some places not only change, but they need to be created, right? we need better understandings of what needs to happen in order for these policies that are written into effect to actually come to pass. In addition to that, and this is something that actually we've been working on in my community with the Power Initiative, which is a Black woman-owned strategy consulting company. Just local shout out. But we've been talking with local philanthropic organizations about what it means to change the grant process in general, right? So talking about what it means to not just have a grant process, but also have a contingency plan in place for technical assistance.
That's right.
So
That's
understanding that your grants are not speaking the language of the people, right? And if they can't even read and process through your document, how do you expect them to be able to be prepared and equipped to respond to the call to action? And there are plenty of organizations, many more than I can count, that are doing the work that simply don't understand what you're asking them for. And if they knew, if they had the proficiency, the competency, not that they're not competent, but the technical competency in order to be able to respond to your request for proposal, you'd be impressed with the work that they do because they're actively doing it.
That's right.
But it's oftentimes the organizations that have hundreds of employees, right? The organizations that have been doing the work, but maybe not at the root of the work for decades.
That's right.
That get the funding, and then they do the same program that they've never really asked anybody in community if they wanted, right? And so it's also really taking a step back to recognize the fact that grant processes aren't reaching the root of the problem. They're not reaching. So we can't expect grant dollars to reach grassroots organizations if you're not interested in the root of the problem, right? And so it's incredibly important for us to recognize that in the grant process and create systems for technical assistance. Our community is actually currently, the Power Initiative is running a grant workshop series. We're in the third phase of doing that, and consistently the feedback that we receive from community members is like, man, I wish I would have known this before I sat down for my first grant application. I wish I could understand what grant reviewers are looking for when they look at my application. I didn't even think to explain that. Like, yeah, I have the data to give them that, but it never occurred to me because I don't even really understand what they're saying and what they're asking for.
That's right.
Now, in addition to that, we need to be looking at who's reviewing the grants, right? We need to be looking at the grant review committees,
That's
right?
right.
Because that also impacts who gets funded,
That's it.
right? So if the people that are reviewing your grants are also people who don't understand what's going on in your community, who have never lived in your community, who don't even know nobody who lives in your community, right? They're just people who are well-intentioned and interested in the greater good, then it's extremely hard for them to even understand what their community needs, right? So we need to also be looking into more equitable systems for grant review. How are we choosing the people who are sitting on these boards? Do they have to live in the community? Do they have to have community experience? Is there some type of baseline that we want to create that even separate from, okay, they've written in technical terms a great grant application, do we maybe want to create more space in the rubric for like who's doing the work? Not necessarily who's the most world-renowned, not necessarily who looks the best on paper, but who's good in the hood, right? Like who knows the people?
That's real.
We need to create more space. Like these need to be real conversations. If we're talking about funneling dollars down to the grassroots level into young activists, we need to have more conversations about who's allowed to make the decisions for what's deserving of funding. I think that's all I had to say. And then last but certainly not least, I told y'all I could go in on this one. I'm going to get off my soapbox after this last point, all right?
Make your points, make your points.
We need to invest in existing structures, right?
Okay.
So it's not only looking at the grant process, looking at who's reviewing the grants, but also looking for ways to simply set aside a dollar amount that's going to go to work that's already getting done, right? And again, even that can get a little fishy when you're talking about who's making those decisions, but is it setting aside a pot of money that is literally just based up to community vote? That literally people can just come in, this is the organization that I want to get some money, and then based on that we break down, okay, well the person with the highest votes gets this amount of money, the person with the second votes get this amount of money. And that way, again, we're putting community voice into these spaces rather than leaving it up to a bunch of people behind a curtain. Okay? And so as we move forward,
Yes, right there.
a unique approach that Gen Z and Millennials bring to the environmental front is holding corporations accountable to environmental justice, such as the beauty and fashion industry. These two younger generations focus on the global impacts of environmental justice. For example, fast fashion companies like Shein have had several reports of lead, PFAS, or pronounced PFAS, and other technical chemicals in their products. Starting with Melody again, discuss why environmental and social responsibility for corporations and private sector is meaningful to an environmental justice agenda.
Yes, social responsibility is extremely meaningful because when you think about it, those checks and balances need to be put in place to ensure our communities, to ensure the customers are safe when they're buying products, are safe when they're in their, like, just safe in general. Like, there needs to be some type of checks and balances for those companies. I use an example from Flint when the asphalt company came in, polluting a neighborhood, polluting a school, like polluting these children that have to breathe every day, have to get on the bus and do all these different things. So these big companies, again, they come in and they pollute our communities, they pollute our cities and all these different things and cause all these different implications. And there needs to, like, they need to be held responsible. There needs to be some type of checks and balances in place so that these things don't just happen. And then where statistically and then completely just keeps tacking on and on and on and on. Like, okay, first is our water. Now we have a new plant in our community. So we have bad water, we have bad air. So it's just continuously going and going and going. So there needs to be some type of checks and balances when it comes to big corporations in our communities,
I think something for me when thinking about the private sector and environmental justice, the first thing that comes to my head is grandfathered facilities. I think this is an issue that, again, our government has no grasp on and has no real authority over just yet. The famous example, here in DC is the chemical facility called the National Engineering Products, located at 1950 Capitol Ave Northeast in Ivy City, DC. This is a facility that has been operating since the 1930s with no air permits. They currently still don't have any air permits. The city actually didn't know this facility existed until 2 years ago.
Oh, wow.
They use cancer-causing chemicals. A lot of these chemicals are actually banned by the EPA. They're on the EPA's list. They have formaldehyde, methylene chloride, phenols, all this and all that, just really bad. And they literally share a wall with the resident. Like when I say share a wall, they share a wall. And you might wonder how did this happen? Not to mention their biggest contractor is the U.S. Navy, or was the U.S. Navy. The last naval contract was in 2017. So mind you, they are getting federal dollars with no permits. That's illegal. That is illegal. They don't have any proper certifications to exist, and literally they don't have the permit that they will require to have in the city probably doesn't even exist because DC doesn't have any toxics regulations. So now this might be a situation that may be unique to DC because we're not a state, but I'm sure this could be replicated across the country. And I think this is something that is super important. How do we handle these facilities like this that just continuously have been going unnoticed, unmonitored? Who knows how many? I'm sure they've had some sort of like monitoring happening, but again, that kind of shows you the neglect of the community. They haven't had any site updates. That's probably technically a brownfield, but this is something that is important because once it's contaminated into the community, they like to talk about minor source pollutants versus major source pollutants, and this facility under the EPA's laws would be considered a minor source polluter, but the impact is major. The fact that they've been here since the 30s, before any major environmental policy in America,
right?
That impact is major. So who knows how many people we've lost due to the cancer. These are chemicals that alter your DNA. These are chemicals that impact your lungs, respiratory issues, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just like we have to do better when it comes to holding our grandfather facilities accountable, and not to just get them into compliance.
Yeah.
Shut them down.
Right.
Because if you're a bad actor, you don't deserve to be here. This is a white-owned family company. The I could really get into it, but this is not the forum for that. But it's a messed up situation, and I feel like the government definitely has to, Sheehan, definitely hold them accountable. But
Yes.
what about these people who are using toxic chemicals in our communities, in our nation's capital? Let's talk about it. In a Black and brown community, like
Let's talk about it. Let's
Right.
get into it. Let's go.
right.
We gotta get into it. Wow. Anthony, that is very familiar sounding to me, right? I'm from Memphis, Tennessee, like I said at the beginning of this, big Memphis. And we just dealt with this same issue. And it's because these corporations aren't being held accountable to the extent that they should be, and they haven't been for so long that it does take a Herculean effort to really get them not just into compliance, but to get restorative justice, right? And what restorative justice looks like in some cases is financial, but in a lot of cases like mine, we've lost both of my grandmothers, right? There's nothing you're going to be able to do to replicate that or replace that. And so I think part of what's missing is that in the corporate responsibility of this is communities and families aren't being seen as stakeholders, right? If you create a business, your customers aren't the only stakeholders. The people that you're paying money to aren't the only stakeholders. Your business exists physically in a space. And for your business to operate and exist in this space, it affects a lot of other folks, especially if you're polluting the air or you're polluting the water or you're polluting the soil. And so Sterilization Services of Tennessee had operated in Memphis and Southwest Memphis, where I grew up, for over 50 years, nearly 50 years, and for 40 plus years, they emitted ethylene oxide, which, like you said, is carcinogenic and mutagenic, right? So it changes your DNA, especially in small children, and is known to cause cancer. Like, it's a definite, like, it's going to cause, somebody's going to get cancer because this is out here. And more recently, over the past 4 years, EPA has been redesignating chemicals and updating laws. And so earlier this year, they passed a law that all sterilizers have to reduce ethylene oxide emissions by 80%, right? And so this is just happened in 2024. They've been doing this since 1970, right? And so part of that corporate responsibility that has been missing, I think the EPA and its leadership is starting to change and shift the gears. But unfortunately, you have blowback, right? Like the Supreme Court overturned the Chevron decision. And so it is a continual fight that we are in to protect ourselves and to hold corporations accountable. And so I am glad to be in the fight with y'all. And we're going to keep fighting until we continue to hold everybody responsible in the court of public opinion, in the actual courts as well.
Yeah, thank you. I think all of what you all have discussed is extremely important, especially in a time where being green is popular, right? So we are increasingly seeing large corporations, businesses, products, tote that this is a green product, right? That we're environmentally friendly and conscious, we're forward thinking, and we have a green agenda that we've set out in our policies, and we this is something that is extremely popular to discuss, but not popular in practice.
That's right.
Can I say one more thing on top
course.
of that? Because I feel like it's not only just the corporations, but it's also our local governments as well. We have a lot of, different not even legislations or different plans and commitments by some of our policymakers about, net zero by yada, 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 like we're going to cut this by this, da, 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 but then turn around in the same breath, cut funding to environmental,
make it make sense.
That's right.
So, as much as we like to hold corporations accountable, it's also our local legislators and local leaders as well who, they like to, use greening and greenwashing as part of their political campaigns. And once they get into position of powers, you may never hear from them again. So I think that's also something to consider as well.
Thank you so much. And so, in adding that point, also in our local, and since we're going there, in our statewide and federal governments, it's extremely popular to talk about green practice and green policy, but the actual implementation is poor. And so to that point, I was just going to say that it's incredibly important for us as constituencies, for us as an electorate, especially in an election year, right, to put our vote where we would like to see, action. And not only that, because although voting is important, it's also important for us to continue to follow up, right? And so it's requiring that that these corporations and these governments and these elected officials that they stay true to their word, right? And that if they don't stay true to their word, the best language that they speak is in losing their seat, all right? That's right. And so and so that should be not just an active threat, but an understanding that this is a power that we wield, that is right. the point and the foundation of democracy, that if you are not pleasing to the public, that it is required that you have to move around somewhere. That's right. Right?
That's right. You gotta go.
Do something. You don't gotta go home. Right. You're gonna have to get out of here.
Fair.
Right.
That's fair.
And so it's incredibly important that we as an electorate not only be committed to our vote and to be particular, not only be committed to a presidential vote, right? There are so many other elections that happen that some would even argue might be a bit more pressing and personal, all right? So it's important that we not only take seriously, which we should take seriously, our right to vote and that power that we wield, but that we also show up in other spaces that we're contacting and reaching out to our elected officials, whether that be by email or it be coming to council meetings, or if it be just showing up. Like, it's important within our capacity that we show up when possible, and furthermore, not only that we show up for those that are able, but that we show up for those that aren't able, right? Because we see, as our system has been created to do in years, that it creates boundaries for people to show up, right? That's right. We understand that oftentimes these meetings and the places in which we should show up in person, are invited to show up in person, are during the workday, or are during times when they know that the average working class citizen could not be available for. And so it's that much more important for those of us that can show up, even if it doesn't affect you directly, to be in those rooms to advocate for others, right? And to continue to bring these issues back to the forefront, because it's the only way. Like, it not that it's the only way, but it is an important way. That's right? In addition to that, while we're on the topic, it's also important, again, going back, for us to continue to support grassroots work and movements and organizations, nonprofits doing the work at the ground level, because we recognize that as much as we as important as it is for us to operate through the correct channels, right, that there are also other ways to go about change. And so it's incredibly important for us to utilize all avenues, all tools that are available to us in order to continue to hold these systems accountable. So whether that be through the use of protest or through the use of gatherings outside of political spaces in order to embolden people to use their voices and utilize the power that inherently exists in them, those are also things that are available to us that we should be considerate of. Anything to add on that topic? Anthony, you look like you're holding your tongue.
Right.
I see the double Dutch energy.
No, I think you said perfectly.
All right, so with that being said, as we come to the end of another amazing episode of the Green Agenda, we always like to leave on a positive note with a call to action. Many young voters have been very vocal about not wanting to vote in this election year. We understand that a lot of people are experiencing disillusionment, right, with the voting process, 100%. With it being 2024, and we continue to deal with a lot of the same social issues that we've been talking about even before I was born as a Gen Zer, all right? And so in 60 seconds or so, we got a little bit of time, so I might even give you a 2 minutes today, all right? Starting with Anthony, what would your advice for your fellow young voters be?
First of all, vote till you can't vote no mo.
All right. All right.
But no, but seriously, I mean, I get it. I definitely do. I definitely was one of those people who, it was hard for me to see the kind of the finish line. It was hard for me to see, what hope looks like, especially during the 2020 elections. I definitely, wasn't feeling my best. I wasn't fully locked in, and I definitely do understand. It's easy to look at all the negatives. It's definitely very easy, very, very easy to look at all the negatives this country has put us through as young Black and brown folks. But something that you, especially in the EJ space, something you definitely have to consider is also the positives. We have seen the greatest investment in the EJ movement this past presidential election. I'm not even like the type of person to like give all the credit to, anything for real, but I think, we people are now starting to pay attention. Us as a society is starting to pay attention. We definitely cannot lose that momentum. This EJ has been around forever. EJ has been here. These issues aren't new, but unfortunately, even like for me, it took me a while to fully grasp, what EJ looks like. And I think some of our, it's hard for a lot of our professionals as well too. But we definitely have to understand that change is happening. Change is going to continue to happen, but and I'm trying to be as bipartisan as possible. But we change is happening. We need to be a part of this change. I definitely do think we can't let whatever your opposing side is get in the way of that silver lining, your goals and your missions. And unfortunately, we can't have it all. And unfortunately, we do have to compromise, and that's just the name of the game, unfortunately. But at the end of the day, we got to keep moving forward, and we got to keep the momentum up. That's like the biggest thing. So I think that's it for me.
Thank you. Keyshawn, Melody?
Okay, I guess I'll go next. I was just talking to my father about this recently, and he brought up a quote from, I think it was Bill Clinton, and he said, to a group of young voters that a car doesn't move, right, unless you start it and you have the keys, right? Voting is the keys, right? But if you don't start the car, like, it'll never move to where you want to go. And so if this country is to move in a place that is more equitable, more environmentally friendly, and more energy sustainable, the people who believe in that have to vote. The people who believe in that can't sit on the sidelines and expect anybody else to do that work for them, or to truthfully just have their best interests or the best interests of the society in totality at the forefront. What we have seen, and honestly, to be at this exact point in history, is to know for a fact that the majority of people and corporations don't care about a green energy future, right, or an equitable one. But it takes the right people to be in the right spaces to do what Administrator Reagan is doing at the EPA, to do what the current administration has done with the IRA and the funding toward environmental justice. And so if you don't vote, we know what that looks like. And so if we do want to invest in a brighter future, and I say invest because that's what you're doing, right? You're going to invest your time, your energy in learning about the issues, and then actually going out and doing the work to cast your vote. And so if you're going to, you have to invest if you want to see any type of return, or if you want to see a better future for anyone, especially us. But the work that we're doing now is not just for us, right? It ain't just, we're not going to vote today and then tomorrow everybody's going to be living in a place with clean air and clean water. That's just not realistic, and it's not how it works. But if we vote today and then we vote again and again and again, then the world can start to be shaped in a much different way. And that's not just a hope, that's something that we can work toward. And so I think it's not fantasy, it's accepting the reality and then acting on it. But what we can't do is, unfortunately, what has been done, and I myself have become dejected to an extent, and even depressed about, kind of what the outlook has been. But the action is always necessary, right? That's our responsibility. I had a conversation recently, and someone was saying that, I should be able to choose what I want to do based on how I feel, right? And, my response was that voting is a civic responsibility, right? You have a civic responsibility to yourself, to your community, and to the future. And so for me, that's why I believe Gen Z, millennials, and everybody else should vote and continue to vote. And as you can see, I'm a black man. And so
I didn't even know
right.
that.
Listen, almost snuck in on you.
Look.
But as a black man, I know, that folks' lives have been lost. Entire towns burned down, folks lynched and killed in order for me to have the right to vote. And so I won't let my folks' deaths be in vain. Their lives won't be in vain. And so I'm going to exercise my right at every turn.
Melody.
Yes, following off of what you said, what inspires me and what pushes me in everything that I do is I am my ancestors' wildest dreams.
Come on.
Everything that they have overcome, everything that they have went through, they did that for us. And look at how far we have come.
That's right.
So voting is the key. Voting is the start. And then also, we as a generation, we get on social media and we complain and complain and complain.
Talking.
Just talking. At the end of the day, life is not perfect. No person, no policy, no nothing is going to be perfect. But you have to align yourself with something. You have to find that person that, okay, he agrees on this, and that. She agrees on this, and that. I agree on that. She might not agree with this that I'm saying, but at least I have this. We have to take that step. We have to start. It's not perfect. The only perfect person that's going to run and be in exact line with you is yourself. And if you're not doing that, you need to find somebody that you can vote for. So take the opportunity. Like he said, people were lynched. People fought hard for us to have this right as African Americans. So never let that slip your mind. Never let that go to the back burner. And use your voice and use your vote because it matters. It counts.
Yeah. And just as we're closing out, I understand that it can feel like you're choosing between, you're looking for the lesser of two evils, right? Especially in this day and age when everything has become extremely convoluted and the parties are overlapping in so many different ways. And, many of the issues that we're fighting for may not even be on the agenda, all right? But it's incredibly important, as they've already said, to remember the shoulders that you stand on. You have to remember who came before you. Like, it's so easy for us to forget. Like, it's so easy for us to lose track and to lose focus because there's so many distractions, and that's intentional. Like, you have to know the enemy that you're up against, right? And you have to understand that the amount of distractions that are in place are not by coincidence, right? These things are placed there. They want you to be disillusioned, right? They want you to stay home. They want you to feel such a loss of hope in the system that you simply refuse to participate. And if there's one thing, if I don't know nothing else about my generation,
Come on.
we do not like being told what to do, y'all. So you cannot let them win. Like, you can't let them get one up on you like that, all right?
Come on.
So if for no other reason, the simple fact that they're sitting back in their chairs, they're sitting in their office, they're sitting on their big stacks of money, hoping that you will be just so disillusioned that you will choose not to participate, if nothing, just prove them wrong, right? And in addition to that, not only should you remember those who came before you, but there was somebody who came and sat on this panel episodes and episodes ago who said it's important for us to think 7 generations ahead.
Come on.
It's an indigenous practice to think intentionally, not just about your children, not your children's children, not even your children's children, right? But to be thinking 7 generations ahead. And what does that look like?
Good.
Like, what does it mean for you to be thinking 7 generations ahead with every decision that you make, with every step that you take, to not only just be thinking about what may impact you, but to think what will impact for generations to come. And so as Keyshawn was saying, you may not see it before you die. And that's an unfortunate reality, but think about 7 generations before you, the sacrifices that they made with you in mind, right? And so you have to also be thinking about what the legacy of your generation will be, right? Do you just want us to be the generation of TikTok? We need something better to stand on, y'all.
Right.
All right? So just remember your legacy, thinking 7 generations ahead, and just always know that the ends justify the means. And so with that being said, we've come to the end of another great episode. Thank you so much for joining us. Please, please, please join us back here on next season of The Green Agenda. We'll be back soon, y'all. Bye.